Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Africa News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the official death toll from West Africa's Ebola epidemic continues to climb, edging ever closer to 5,700. Authorities in Sierra Leone call for military aid from the US as it falls behind the fight back in comparison to other nations at the center of the outbreak. Also, Togo's opposition says it won't be accepting the president's dismissal of calls for a cap to leadership mandates lying down. If President Gnassingbé runs and wins next year's vote, his family would have been in power for nearly 5 decades. And Rwandans face a tug-of-war between the language of Molière and that of Shakespeare. Officially, it's an Anglophone country, but many still find French tripping off the tongue more easily. But first, the official death toll from West Africa's Ebola epidemic has now climbed to almost 5,700. That's out of at least 15,935 cases across 8 countries. Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia have been hardest hit by the deadly outbreak. The World Health Organization's logged 600 new incidents of Ebola from the affected trio over the past week alone. Whilst the viral spread appears to be slowing in Liberia, infection rates in Sierra Leone are accelerating. The UN's emergency Ebola mission in the country's warned that a December containment target will not be met. And on Wednesday, Freetown asked the United States to send military aid to help ramp up the fight back there against Ebola. Katerina Vitozzi is in Freetown. She tells us more about the challenges the country faces.
It really comes down to the question of resources and where each country is in terms of the level of response that it has already got in place to deal with this outbreak. I was talking to the UN in Liberia, for example, back in September, and at that point they said that they did have enough beds in treatment facilities to treat patients. Compare that to the situation today in Sierra Leone, where the UN say they're still lacking about 350 beds for all the patients and to meet this new and ever-increasing caseload. One of the UN targets that you mentioned there that Sierra Leone looks like it is going to miss is with regards also to burial rates. The UN wanted to see 70% of burials happening safely in the country. That's simply not happening. Only about 50% of them are currently happening safely and promptly. And part of that is due to a lack of serious and proper burial teams. Only about 25% of the right amount that they need are currently in place. And there are also frequent strikes of the burial teams that are currently carrying out this work. There was one just this week in the east of the country in Kenema when a burial team went on strike over pay. And as part of the protest, they left several bodies of Ebola victims on the main roads outside hospitals in the town. So lots of problems that the government and respective NGOs are trying to deal with to meet these UN containment targets and bring the infection rate down in the country.
So how are authorities going to tackle this conflict between traditional burial practices and getting the message through that this is really a setback in terms of efforts to try and tackle the spread of the disease?
Yeah, it really is a setback. Just put a figure that the WHO have said that 70% of new cases are in Sierra Leone as a result of transmission from people washing bodies during traditional funeral rites. And the messages that the government and NGOs and partners in Sierra Leone are trying to push out is that families and people can offer relatives and friends dignified burials without touching them, and they can still be in accordance with their faith and traditional practices. So there are mass sensitization campaigns. I spent much of yesterday sitting in a small booth in the center of Freetown where they were playing out sensitization messages to try and hammer home the messages that safe burials are the only way that Ebola is going to be properly contained in Sierra Leone.
Katerina Vitozzi there for us in Freetown. Time now for some news in brief. Zimbabwe's Vice President Joyce Mujuru has been barred from running for a seat on a top committee of the ruling ZANU-PF party. Rivals and state medias linked her to an alleged plot to assassinate longtime President Robert Mugabe, accusations she's strongly denied. Sidelining Mujuru from the Central Committee is a blow to those hoping she might succeed the 90-year-old leader. This comes amidst the recent entry of Mugabe's wife Grace into politics. She's been one of Maduro's fiercest critics, and the speculation that she may also be hoping to one day succeed her husband as president. One of the militants suspected of involvement in the beheading of a French hiker in Algeria has allegedly been killed by the army. Algiers announced on Wednesday that the member of Islamist extremist group, Soldiers of the Caliphate, died during a military operation in October. Algerian soldiers launched an intense search for Hervé Gordel in the Judura Mountains when he was kidnapped and later executed in September. And Nigeria's hopes to contain inflation before presidential elections next year have hit another snag after the currency hit a record low against the dollar on Wednesday. That followed the central bank's moves to try and stem losses earlier this week by devaluing the naira by 8%. Africa's top economy has been hit by falling global oil prices and jittery foreign investors. Well, Togo's opposition leader Jean-Pierre Fabre has slammed President Gnassingbé's rejection of demands for a cap on the number of presidential mandates. A general election scheduled for next year, and though he's not yet declared he'll be running again, Gnassingbé has already governed the country for over 4 decades. And earlier this week, the president said that he had no plans to change the constitution to entrench a limit to how many terms a president can serve. Well, Fabre says Gnassingbé promised reform back in 2006 and will be pressured to deliver.
The Togolese president is wrong, because the constitution he says he wants to preserve is in fact the document his father has altered in 2002. But his father has died, and this altered constitution has therefore disappeared with him. The Citizen Broomstick movement in Togo launched a petition to gather 500,000 signatures. Its goal, getting the 1992 constitution back. We will get all these signatures within 40 days, and then we will demand from the National Assembly the repeal of the 2002 Constitution.
Well, finally, the annual summit of French-speaking countries opens in Dakar this weekend. But despite historically speaking French for decades, Rwanda will not be represented. The language is still widespread, even though officially English is the preferred language. But day-to-day practicalities does mean that French is making something of a comeback, as our correspondents found out. Take a look.
6 years ago, these children would greet strangers with a bonjour. Now it's...
Good morning.
In 2008, Rwanda replaced all French instruction with English, a language few spoke. Despite accelerated help, it's been a challenge for many teachers, including Laurent, who, for fear of criticising the government, requests anonymity.
It's not easy to adapt, but you just have to arrange it. Using the English language is difficult for me, for the words and the quality. It's not efficient.
At K-Lab, an incubator for startups, Pacome has established an online brokerage. He suffered greatly from the language change, which came in the middle of his studies.
I'm not strong in neither English or French. I just speak half of both.
But he recognises that speaking English has benefits.
In terms of business and trade, it's better because many neighboring countries use English. So I can see that there are some advantages in using English.
In Kigali, signs of written French are rare. The language of Shakespeare is now the norm at the office. But Rwandans remain very attached to French. The French and Belgian schools are full, and some post-genocide returnees from Uganda are taking evening classes.
To compete on the job market, we need to be able to speak both languages. I intend to register my child in a French school, and I hope that when she's given homework in French, I'll be able to be there for her and help her in her homework.
Pointing to a possible revival, French will be reintroduced as a compulsory language for primary school children in 2016. It appears that Molière's language has a future here in Rwanda.
Well, that wraps up African news for me for now, but do stay with us. There'll be a short break and more news and headlines from around the world coming up. Take care.